What's going on, guys? Welcome back, and today I am going to be giving you guys, as promised, my thoughts on the most recent 3 episodes of The Bad Batch, episodes 3, 4, and 5, and I'm going to be giving you my thoughts, whether I think the series is improving, or if I think it's getting worse, or if I think it's just staying the same, or just my general thoughts on these episodes. So we're going to start with episode 3, an episode that, in terms of the side of the story dedicated to the Bad Batch themselves, of course, Hunter, Echo, Wrecker, Tech, and Omega, those characters. In terms of that side of the story, there wasn't really much going on there. It was rather conventional. They go to this moon like an Ordo, where they find this lizard that likes to eat energy or something, and it's called an Ordo moon dragon. Now, I remember from playing Jedi Fallen Order that there was a planet called Ordo Eris, where the bounty hunter, guild or whatever, not this bounty hunter group called the Haxian Brood or something, that kind of track you down throughout the game. I remember that they were located on a planet called Ordo Eris, if I'm not mistaken, so I don't know if that is the same planet or if it's one of the moons surrounding that planet. I don't know, just something that my nerd brain kind of picked up on was I recognized that name from the Fallen Order game. So they go to this planet called, or they go to this Ordo moon or something, and they have to kind of fix up their ship, and then this moon dragon or whatever steals a part from their ship. So then Omega and Hunter go to track it down, and then Hunter gets taken out, and Omega has to go into the den of the beast herself. And I did like kind of the resolution to that she doesn't resort to violence. She takes Hunter's blaster with her into the cave, and rather than resort to violence and just simply shoot up the monster, which she very easily could do, she decides to kind of, use her brain and makes her way out of that situation by thinking logically, and ends up throwing away her flashlight to distract it, and takes the part back to Hunter and the rest of the crew without harming either her or the creature. And I think that's very smart, because there's an episode from Star Wars Rebels, one very similar to that, called, I believe, Chopper Base or something like that, The Mystery of Chopper Base, and basically it's when they arrive on Adelon, I believe, and they basically just go into these tunnels with these spiders, and they just shoot them and they kill them, and it's a weird episode because it's not really fun to watch. I never found it fun to watch because they're just going and killing a bunch of innocent creatures rather than trying to sympathize with them, which Kanan eventually does later in season 3, but at the time it just seemed like such a weird choice for an episode to just have our heroes go and annihilate a bunch of innocent creatures that they're just trespassing on their land. And I just kind of liked seeing here in this show, The Bad Batch, rather than having Omega just easily, blast the thing to hell, she just decided to sympathize with it and kind of used her brain and made her way out of that situation without resorting to violence. And I think there's kind of a nice message there, because in Star Wars so often we see characters just, let's shoot everybody up, get out of here. But I liked that Omega kind of used her resources that were available to her, thought logically, and made it out of her situation without harming a single creature. I just really liked that. There was something nice that I liked about that. Other than that, there wasn't a lot to mention on that side of the story. There wasn't a lot going on. They set up the plot line going on with Wrecker, where he bashes his head when they crash the ship on the moon or when they crash land, and ever since then, each episode there's been little moments where he's his head is hurting and he's clutching his head and he says he has a headache and he's like, I must have heard it in the crash, but I'm pretty sure that it has something to do with the inhibitor chip, whether or not when they crashed the ship it kind of interfered with the inhibitor chip or something, but there's obviously something going on with the chip in his head that they're hinting at, because they keep kind of bringing that back in every episode since then. They've brought that back, so there's something clearly going on with his inhibitor chip. And besides that, in that episode there wasn't really a lot going on. On Crosshair's side of the story, however, we had a lot of interesting things going on. We get introduced to Director Rampart or whatever, who was briefly shown in episode 2, and we see how he and Tarkin are kind of these people who are lobbying for the conscripted soldiers, and the Kaminoans are trying to stay in their good graces, or in the Empire's good graces, so they're trying to kind of create some kind of experimental clone unit or or something like that, and they kind of hinted there's obviously some mystery around Omega, but that Omega is this kind of experimental clone that they're working on, and they want to kind of create these advanced, like, I guess, kind of super soldier clones in a way to try and impress the Empire and just prevent the Empire from shutting down their cloning operations, which is kind of interesting. I've heard people like saying that apparently it could be a Star Killer or something from Star Wars Legends. I don't think that's likely. I think it's obviously something to do with Omega, and they're trying to get her back. But we do kind of have one of my favorite aspects of the show is showing the transition from Republic to Empire and kind of the decisions that went into changing the Republic soldiers, the clones, into the conscripted bodies, or whatever they call them, the hired bodies, I believe is what the Kaminoans refer to them as. But we see Tarkin send Crosshair leading a group of non-clones out to annihilate the rest of Saw Gerrera's group that the Bad Batch failed to annihilate in the first episode. And you'd see the like Crosshair coming into conflict with these conscripted soldiers, and this guy's like, oh, there needs to be a change, you're not effective anymore, or whatever else. He's just kind of being an asshole. But then when they get there, Crosshair, like, kind of a grim scene. They just show up, they annihilate everybody, and Crosshair's like, oh, goes up to this one lady, he's like, where's Gerrera? She's like, I don't know, just immediately shoots her. Just, like, brutal. And then orders them to execute the civilians, and the guy who was kind of being an asshole on the plane or on the ship earlier, who we wanted to believe, was an asshole and, a character that we were supposed to not like, because, we want to side with Crosshair because he's the one we're acquainted with. But now you see he's actually the one showing compassion to the innocent, and Crosshair is the one, or whatever, with no mercy, just ordering them to mercilessly kill all these civilians. And it's really dark, honestly, darker than, Clone Wars was pretty dark, and there's a lot of implied violence in that show, but this is really dark stuff. And he, is like, oh, those weren't our orders, we have to kill them. And so you see the difference there, where it's like, okay, the stormtroopers were less effective because the clones were basically programmed. They were programmed, and it kind of adds another layer of tragedy that, they were kind of programmed from the very beginning to do things against their will. So Crosshair just kills that guy and then orders the rest of them to execute the civilians, which they do, and then they return to Kamino, and Crosshair is rather upset. You can tell when they return to their barracks that he kind of misses his old crew, and that he's not entirely at peace with what he's being forced to do. And it's rather interesting. It's very, very interesting kind of moral dilemma there with that character, because it's a character that from the beginning in Clone Wars Season 7 seemed kind of antagonistic and mean. But, you see how even a character like that isn't, void of empathy or compassion. And he's just another victim being forced into these positions, and just very, very interesting character. I really am invested in Crosshair. He's easily my most, the character that I am most invested in this show, because he is at the core of this kind of rivalry happening between the Empire and the Kaminoans and the clones and the conscripted soldiers, and he's in the middle of all of it, and he's just being pushed around. It's tragic and also just very upsetting, because it's like, wow, Crosshair's merciless, I hate him, but at the same time, it's like you can't blame him, like it's not his fault. So there's a lot of interesting themes going on about, free will and just really, really interesting concepts going on there. Definitely Crosshair's story is one of my favorite aspects of the show, and that was easily the best part of that episode, because the Bad Batch side of the episode there was rather conventional in certain respects. But episode 3 was okay. It was pretty good. And then moving into the fourth episode, this is where we get introduced to Fennec Shand, of course, who we knew was going to appear in the show from the trailers. And this episode didn't really do a lot for me, and I don't think it did a lot for most people. It's watchable, don't get me wrong, but it kind of sets certain things in motion. The Bad Batch have to go to this one planet because they need resources, because, they're out of food and money, and they need to kind of get some stuff. So Hunter, fake sells Echo as a fake droid to this guy to get money, and then Echo breaks himself out later, which is kind of amusing. And the droids end up becoming useful in repairing their ship later. So they need resources. They go out there, but then this one guy who kind of lets them land or whatever, and they're really bad at bribing him. Kind of funny, but he ends up calling in Fennec to basically, or alerts her to the fact that, I believe the bounty that she's looking for is here on the planet, or I don't even remember what the planet was called, but she shows up. Omega gets lost in the crowd, and she kind of tries to, kind of shows up as the motherly figure. Oh, I'll take care of you, little child. And then Hunter shows up and all hell breaks loose. A chase ensues. Wrecker eventually shows up to try and help out, but then kind of just gets his head bashed into a wall by Fennec and gets taken out instantly. And then a chase ensues on a bunch of speeders. Fennec takes out a bunch of innocent people, which kind of shows how ruthless she is, and it's a cool scene, don't get me wrong, and it's kind of hard to compare animation to live action, but I've seen everyone point this out, literally down to the sound design of the scene. It's basically a copy-paste, or in many ways is similar to the opening chase, or the chase at the beginning of Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, which I think I've always liked that scene. I always thought it was pretty cool, but it's basically just a repeat of that scene. It's just, down to the fact that, okay, it's a female bounty hunter, and they're trying to take out or capture a, very important individual or valuable individual. In the case of Attack of the Clones, it was Padme. Here it's Omega. So it's, very similar scene. The setup is very similar, and it was a cool chase. It was cool to see Fennec, but in a way, the episode does feel like just meant to be a display of how cool Fennec is and what her abilities are, which I guess is kind of important to show that she is a threat to them. So they do have to show how far she's willing to go and how threatening she can be, because in the next episode they're talking about how big of a threat Fennec is, so it is important to show off how big of a threat she is. She takes out Wrecker in 2 seconds, and so I guess in a way that was important, and she's going to be a reoccurring character in the show from what I gather. So I think they're going to pull a similar thing with her that they did with Boba Fett in Mando Season 2, where she shows up at the beginning, and then she shows up again closer to the end, and maybe kind of forms an uneasy alliance with the Bad Batch, similar to how Boba Fett appeared towards the end of Mando Season 2 and ended up forming an alliance with Mando. I believe they're going to pull something similar with that, and that explains why she's wanted by the Imperial Security Bureau in The Mandalorian, because I'm assuming she kind of goes against her orders. She was probably ordered by the Kaminoans, or hired by the Kaminoans and the Empire, to hunt down Omega and bring her back to Kamino, but I'm guessing eventually, after talking things out with the Bad Batch, maybe aligns with them against the Kaminoans and the Empire, and that's why she's wanted by them in The Mandalorian. So I think that's probably what's going on there. And, she's cool. It was a cool chase, cool fight, but overall the episode was just, didn't really progress anything. Nothing major really happened. It's just to establish Fennec as a character and as a threat for the rest of the show, and to establish that the Bad Batch is being, pursued actively by certain groups of people. And then going into the 5th episode, another one that, doesn't do a lot. We don't get to see any more of Crosshair, which is kind of lame, because we've had 2 episodes straight of no Crosshair, which makes me kind of sad because he's my favorite character. But you get to see some cool stuff happen. The Bad Batch goes to this planet because Echo remembers some individual that kind of gave information, or a contact that kind of gave information to the Jedi in the Clone Wars, and it's this Trandoshan lady who's voiced by Danny DeVito's wife, Sid or something, and the guys kind of are being kind of stupid, and they're like, oh no, where's Sid? And then Omega just kind of figures out immediately that the Trandoshan lady obviously is Sid, which I guess is kind of annoying. I get it, Omega's a smart character, and she's obviously more perceptive in some ways than the Bad Batch, probably due to her genetic manipulation. But the fact that they're just kind of dumbing down the Bad Batch in certain respects is kind of silly, especially considering that Hunter has like advanced senses or whatever, like that's his primary mutation. So the fact that he wouldn't pick up on the fact that Sid is like lying and that she is Sid, I don't know, just something about that just kind of was stupid. Like the fact that they were dumbing down the Bad Batch so much. Like, okay, Wrecker not picking up on it, I get it, but like Tech and Hunter, okay, come on, guys. And then Echo having never seen Sid and only heard about her, it's just kind of like all the pieces there are just kind of silly. Like they try to have the scene where she's like, oh man, Omega's way smarter than you guys, she's the brains of the operation. Just something about that I found weird. Like, why did they dumb them down so much there? It just felt kind of weird. But she ends up sending them on this mission to basically liberate this slave from the Zygerian slavers, who are like the cat people from Clone Wars that they established, and they're trying to like rebuild their slave empire that collapsed in season 4 of the Clone Wars when they like took out all their stuff on Kadava, took out their operation there. So they're trying to rebuild their slave empire. And they have to go liberate this child in exchange for the information of who Fennec is and who hired her, because they want to know basically who's on their tail and what the reputation is. So they do that in exchange for that information. So they go out. It turns out that the kid they were assigned to rescue, Moochie, is actually this baby Rancor. And semantics ensue. They have a fight. Hunter fights the main Zygerian guy and beats him rather quickly. Like, they built it up like this epic showdown, and then Hunter literally just kicks him in the face and wins the fight. It's like, oh, okay. But yeah, semantics ensue. They have a fight. Eventually, they realize that Moochie's not the other slave girl in the encampment. It's actually the baby Rancor. So Wrecker is able to take him out, and we get a little cameo from Bib Fortuna, who shows up at Sid's place and is demanding to have Moochie returned, and then the Bad Batch return with Moochie, and then we realize the connection to Jabba the Hutt, and that obviously the Rancor Moochie is the same Rancor that Luke defeats in Return of the Jedi, which is rather dark, because they're trying to form a bond between us and this creature, and that it's such a cute Rancor, but then you realize it gets crushed by a gate in 25 years, and it makes you kind of sad. So I don't know why they want to do that to us, but yeah, that's a little bit dark, but Hunter talks to Sid, and she gives them information on who Fennec is and her reputation, and still, they do not know who hired her, although I think it's pretty obvious that it's the Kaminoans. Maybe in some weird twist of fate it ends up being Boba Fett, although I'm pretty sure it's implied heavily in Mando that she and Boba Fett had not met before that show. Even though they never said it, I got that vibe. So I'm pretty sure it's the Kaminoans and the Empire have hired her to track down Omega, bring her back to them. But we still don't know who hired her, and Sid is now threatening the Bad Batch because she's basically like, oh, if there's someone of this like caliber chasing you down, then that means that you have something valuable. And she's like, don't worry, I can keep a secret, but I'm also basically holding this over your head that if you don't follow my rules or whatever, or don't do these missions for me, then I'm going to give you up. So there's kind of an uneasy alliance being formed between the Bad Batch now and this Sid lady, because basically she's holding this over their head, the fact that she has the information of who's with them and how valuable they are to certain people, and that if they don't continue to work for her, then she'll give them up. So that's setting in motion, I feel, the rest of the season. They're probably going to continue to go on missions for this Sid lady, and some stuff's probably going to happen there. I don't know how Rex is going to come into play. I don't know when that's going to happen. But once again, we have 16 episodes of this show, and we are, we're only 5 in. So there's a lot left of the show. And now we're just going to kind of give an overview. I'll give you my thoughts on just kind of how I think the show's going so far. The best episode is obviously still the first one. It had the most time to tell its story and kind of get you invested. Episode 3 had some really cool aspects with Crosshair, and a nice little subversion with Omega not resorting to violence at the end. Episode 5 was a cool action-y episode, although the action was mostly just copy-pasted from Attack of the Clones, and the episode was mainly just meant as a setup for Fennec Shand, although that's fine, I guess. And then Episode 5 kind of tied some things in, interestingly, to Return of the Jedi, and had some interesting elements in there that were kind of surprising that I didn't expect, but it also does set in motion, I feel, the rest of the plot for the season. So, I can't really judge this show too much so far. Like I said, I'm still waiting for them to really give a lot of character development or give some depth to the characters like Echo, Tech, and Wrecker. Wrecker, you can already tell they're setting up for kind of a tragic arc where, he's easily kind of the most lovable character, but he's probably going to end up becoming like an antagonistic force later on if the inhibitor chip in his head does activate, and then the Empire and the Kaminoans maybe find a way to take advantage of that and turn him against the group. Then you can obviously tell that something like that will happen in the future and that they're setting him up for a tragic story arc. But like Echo, once again, in the 4th episode, is just used as a gag. He's sold off into the droids, and it's like, okay, but like this character has been through so much, and you're still just treating him as a gag. Like, they're still just treating Echo like a gag. Tech is also treated like a gag. Like, you could do stuff with these characters, and I hope that they do. If they have Rex come back, there's no way there won't be a scene where he talks to Echo about what happens to Fives. There has to be a scene like that, because no one talked to him in Season 7. Like, it would be really annoying if Echo found out about Fives dying off screen. Like, they need to really bring that up. They need to talk about how Echo's torture that he endured from the Techno-Union experiments, like, affected him. They need to do that. Otherwise, he's just like a gag, and it's like, why did you even bring him back in the first place? Like, they really need to give him some depth. But once again, we have plenty of the show to get through. We have, like, 11, 12 episodes left? I think 11, right? So, we've got lots of time left. They can really make these episodes as long as they want. I feel like most of them are going to be the 25-minute length of like a normal Clone Wars episode from here on out. The premiere was kind of a special event, and I feel most of them are going to be a similar length, except maybe the finale and some episodes building up to it. But they can make the episodes as long as they want, and they also have more time to tell the story. With something like Mandalorian, they could afford... or they could not afford to spend the time on fillery episodes there. Like, even one episode, like in Season 2, where they had that second episode and nothing really happened in terms of story progression, that hurt the pacing of the season in certain respects, because when you only have, 7 or 8 episodes to tell the story of your season, even wasting time in one episode can affect the pacing. But with a show like this, where we've got 16 episodes in this season, and we also have another season coming out, they can afford to spend this time and just kind of have small little tie-ins to the other movies and fun little fan servicey elements, and, as long as they do give these characters needed depth, because Clone Wars had a lot of depth in its storytelling, and this show has a lot to build up to, or has a lot to live up to in terms of Clone Wars. And they need to kind of achieve that level of depth with it, because so far, besides a couple of moments in episodes 1 and 3, with the interesting kind of moral questions about Crosshair and the transition from Republic to Empire, besides those interesting moral questions being brought up there isn't a lot of depth or meat to the show. So far, it's a very watchable, entertaining piece of Star Wars media that I will continue to watch and that I'm enjoying watching. But besides episodes 1 and 3 and a couple aspects in there, it's fine. It's watchable. But most of the storytelling so far has been conventional, and it's kind of following a similar formula to that of The Mandalorian. And once again, I can't judge it, because Clone Wars, if they're planning on making this the next Clone Wars show, let's say it's 3, 4, 5 seasons, then they have a lot of time. They have a lot of time just in this time period in general to tell the story. And Clone Wars, if we're going off of that show, the first season and a half, I'd say, is pretty weak. So, like, I never, like, most people skip season 1. If I were to ever rewatch episodes of Clone Wars, I'd skip season 1 completely. So, you know, Clone Wars took a season to get its groove. And I'm sure that Bad Batch may also take a decent amount of time to get its groove before people really start to get into it and before it really starts to achieve the level of depth that was there with Clone Wars and even some parts of Rebels. And so I can't really judge it. I'm enjoying watching it. I find it very watchable and entertaining, but it has a little ways to go to achieve the level of depth that was there with shows like Clone Wars. And as a sequel to Clone Wars, I feel like it really does need to prove itself to be a worthy successor to that show. But yeah, that's pretty much it on all my thoughts. I think Bad Batch is a very watchable, entertaining show. I'll continue to watch it. It's more watchable than WandaVision or some of the previous Marvel crap, but it still is yet to achieve the level of other Star Wars media that has come out in recent years. Like, even Jedi Fallen Order was a really good game. I don't even think it's reached that level. Like, it's entertaining, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I find it entertaining and watchable, and there's no, like, huge problems with it in terms of the storytelling and narrative so far. Like, just, like, stuff like Omega and Hunter's relationship and the kind of family dynamic they're building up there. It's just conventional. Like, it's conventional, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's following a convention, but there's nothing wrong with the way they're executing it. They're executing it fine. There's just nothing really super interesting going on besides the stuff with Crosshair and the Kaminoans, and I just want to be honest with that because people are praising this show like it's amazing, and I mean I think it's fun, but I don't think it's amazing so far. I think they have a little ways to go to achieve, once again, the level of Clone Wars. So, you guys, please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? What are your thoughts on the most recent 3 episodes of The Bad Batch? Just whatever your thoughts are, once again, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.